Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday again. Today, we are diving into a breaking story shaking up one of America's most famous political families. Yes, we are talking about the Kennedys and specifically Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. His own family is now calling for him to resign. And for those of us who support RFK Jr.'s stance, I believe that this moment tells us something much bigger about America. Welcome to Nellie Miranda.
Tonight, 9 former heads of the CDC slamming Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a blistering New York Times op-ed. In it, blasting Kennedy's firing of CDC Director Dr. Susan Menarez last week that sparked outrage within the agency. 4 top leaders resigning in protest. Last week, staffers cheered outside CDC headquarters in support. The former CDC heads writing Menarez refused to, quote, rubber stamp his dangerous and unfounded vaccine recommendations aimed at restricting access or heed his demand to fire senior CDC staff. The former CDC leaders also accusing the secretary of downplaying measles vaccines and replacing experts on advisory committees with, quote, unqualified individuals who share his dangerous and unscientific views.
We need strong leadership that will go in there and that will be able to execute on President Trump's broad ambitions.
President Trump today challenging pharmaceutical companies to justify the success of their various COVID drugs after launching Operation Warp Speed in his first term, fast-tracking vaccine production. This as COVID cases rise in 31 states and access to that vaccine tightens.
So here's the situation that stemmed from the clip that I just showed. This past week, RFK Jr. testified in front of the Senate Finance Committee. He raised questions about vaccine safety and took direct aim at the CDC. This next clip is hard to watch, but take a listen.
You're the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You don't have any idea how many Americans died from COVID?
I don't think anybody knows that because there was so much data chaos coming out of the CDC, and there were so many perverse incentives. And these are models.
You don't know the answer of how many Americans died from COVID. This is the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
This was a bully campaign. No way you're going to ask someone a question, then cut them off before hearing their whole answer. This was nonsense. During COVID era, if you died of old age, they said that you died of COVID. If you died in labor, they said you died of COVID. And if you got hit by a car and died, COVID caused it. So it's a nonsense question to ask how many people died of COVID, and RFK Jr.'s answer was correct. However, the fallout wasn't just from the media. It came from his own family. His sister, Kerry Kennedy, said, quote, enough is enough. In a letter also shared on her Instagram, Kerry wrote, the first smallpox vaccine was developed in 1796, and since then, countless vaccines have been developed and saved millions of lives. Vaccines work. This is not up for debate. Medical decisions belong in the hands of trained and licensed professionals, not incompetent and misguided leadership. The decimation of critical institutions like the NIH and the CDC will lead to the loss of innocent lives. This means that children, mothers, fathers, and those you love are at risk now, like never before. I stand with the many courageous individuals in the medical and scientific community who have had to set aside their vital work to speak truth to power to keep the public safe. Enough is enough. Secretary Kennedy must resign. Now, signed, Kerry Kennedy. It be your own folks. I mean, it really do. Because his nephew, Joe Kennedy III, blasted him as, quote, a threat to public health and even warned that none of us will be spared. Just think about that for a moment. The Kennedy dynasty, one of the most powerful families in American politics, is now publicly turning on one of their own. Tammy Bruce responded to Kerry in a very long letter, and I'm going to read you a little bit of it. So it says, an open letter to Kerry Kennedy. You people are awful despite your family's checkered past and horrible behavior of so many of the men. Americans have stood with you out of loyalty, sentimentality, and too often grief despite the questionable establishment of your family's wealth, the treatment of Marilyn Monroe, and the general womanizing, the abandonment of Mary Jo Kopechne to her death, allegations of rape. One could go on, but the point is your family has stayed loyal and protective of family members who have done the most appalling of things. But the moment one of your own acts on his conscience for his country, you attempt to throw him to the wolves and publicly condemn him. Never a word for the trail of abused or abandoned woman left behind by a Kennedy, but because one of your men supports Trump in an effort to make the lives of Americans better, that alone is beyond the pale. In your ugly treatment of your brother, you reveal the rot that has broken the hearts of the American people so many times over the years. And then she says some more stuff. And then at the bottom, she says, the condition of this country should shock everyone, even if their name is Kennedy. We know it at least shocks one of you who, like us, has had enough of the fear and hopelessness assigned to us for generations. Americans are happy to see Bobby on our side as we refuse to comply and will not go gentle into the catastrophes to which we are expected to succumb. Instead, with Trump and all who joins us, we will fight, fight, fight. Well, Trump reposted it saying it was a great statement from Tammy Bruce. When asked about the hearing, I am glad that Trump had RFK Jr.'s back on this. Watch.
Do you have full confidence in what RFK Jr. is doing?
Well, I didn't get to watch the hearings today, but he's a very good person. And he means very well, and he's got some little different ideas. I guarantee a lot of the people at this table like RFK Jr., and I do. But he's got a different take, and we want to listen to all of those takes. But I heard he did very well today. But it's not your standard. It's not your standard talk, I would say, and that has to do with medical and vaccines. But if you look at what's going on in the world with health, and look at this country also with regard to health, I like the fact that he's different.
Now, this is really about principled dissent. RFK Jr. isn't afraid to question the prevailing consensus, even when it makes him the black sheep of his own family. And let's be honest, that takes guts. It is also about the role of bureaucracy versus the people. For decades, public health officials have made sweeping decisions with very little accountability. What RFK Jr. is doing is pulling back the curtain and saying, let's not just trust, let's verify. And at the heart of it all, this is about free speech and open debate. If you can't even ask questions without being silenced, or in this case, attacked by your own family, then what the hell are we doing? But here's the thing. Should family loyalty outweigh principle? Should RFK Jr. resign simply because Kerry or Joe don't like what he's saying? Sometimes doing the right thing means standing against the crowd, even against your own blood. And if you listen closely to their words, Kerry and Joe are speaking out of fear. Fear that challenging the establishment could bring consequences. And then, of course, the media piled on. Bill Maher mocked the entire hearing, calling it a train wreck, and said that he stood with the knives against RFK Jr. Watch.
The knives are out for Bobby Kennedy, and I gotta say, I'm with the knives. I tried, but you know what? We're going to talk about it, but I mean, he was grilled for 3 hours. Show some of the tape. It was pretty hard to watch.
You're a charlatan. That's what you are.
You're just making stuff up. You're talking gibberish.
Mr. Secretary,
I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a question, Senator Cassidy, or is this the speech that you don't want me to answer?
How can you be that ignorant?
Senator Cantwell,
You're wrong.
you are a hazard to the health of the American people.
Oh, poor Bobby. He talked so long he gained his voice.
But we all know comedians get paid to exaggerate. They aren't scientists, they aren't doctors, and they definitely aren't policymakers. RFK Jr.'s questions about vaccine efficacy, about government overreach, and about transparency, those questions are legitimate, and mocking him doesn't answer the questions. So what does this mean for America? It means that we are at a crossroad. Do we accept every word from bureaucrats as gospel truth, or do we insist on accountability? Do we let family dynasties and political elites decide who's allowed to speak, or do we defend the right of anyone, even a Kennedy, to challenge the system? Leadership isn't about popularity. It's not about keeping the peace at Thanksgiving dinner. It's about principle. And right now, RFK Jr. is showing more independence than his critics give him credit for. So here's my question for you. Should Robert F. Kennedy Jr. resign under pressure from his own family, or should he stand his ground for the sake of open debate and accountability in government? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like and subscribe, as it really helps support the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.